Join the most innovative and passionate education community at South by Southwest EDU 2023. Take part in impactful community-driven programming, unparalleled networking opportunities, and unexpected discoveries. March 6th through 9th, 2023 in Austin, Texas. Visit southbysouthwestedu.com to discover more than 200 sessions already revealed, featuring inspiring thought leaders in education. Register today. This is EWA Radio, the podcast of the Education Writers Association. I'm public editor and your host, Kavita Cardoza. My guest today is Aisha Sultan, a syndicated columnist for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, who frequently covers education and parenting. She followed Tyra Johnson, a mother of 3 young children, through the pandemic and saw the challenges they faced firsthand. The resulting documentary, which was also an EWA Fellowship project, premiered at the St. Louis International Film Festival and aired on the local PBS station in St. Louis. Aisha, we don't often have visual documentary filmmakers on EWA Radio, so this is really a treat for the first episode of the year.
I'm excited to talk to you about this project.
So this was an independent project. Tell us a little bit about Tyra Johnson and her family. How and when did you meet them, and what made them stand out?
Sure. So in the first year of the pandemic, like a lot of newspapers, my newspaper faced a financial, crunch. And so we were taking unpaid furloughs for a couple of weeks. And I had been invited during that time to participate in a written project in which we were looking to see what the impact of the pandemic was going to be in one of the zip codes that really has the worst health outcomes in our region and in the nation. And in the process of that, because the editor of that project knew it was funded through the Pulitzer Foundation, because they knew that my interest is in education, families, parenting, they connected me with a nonprofit and social work group that helps mothers with children, young children, and helps connect them to resources. So I interviewed several families, moms, to see whether they were open to kind of the intensive reporting that happens in a story like this. It is, as reporters, we ask a lot of questions, we show up a lot, and this is a difficult time. It's during a pandemic and things are not really safe. So we also had to figure out how we were going to do this. And Tyra and I really connected. I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain when you feel like this person understands what I'm trying to do, and I feel like they get me and I get them. And I think we both felt that right away. So because it wasn't safe, there was no vaccine or anything, for that print reporting, it was all through the phone. And we had many hour-long conversations, and I had her describe scenes and FaceTime and let me see what the situation was for them. And in the process of doing that reporting, I just thought this would make an excellent documentary because this is a historic moment, and who is capturing this visually in real time? I had made one documentary prior, so I kind of had an idea of what it would entail. So then it became a matter of raising the money and finding the support to be able to hire the people who I would need to be able to make it.
So you followed her family for 2 years. The youngest child actually wasn't born when you started filming, right?
Tyra was expecting, and at the time, she had a daughter who was in pre-K and a son who should have been starting first grade. So I had been in contact with her before, but we actually showed up August 2020 when she was going to homeschool and virtually school her kids. That's when I showed up with a crew.
So this is a non-narrated film, and what I loved, Aisha, is that you just let the story unfold like it literally was show, don't tell. And there are some beautiful moments you've captured.
Why do you have to have home at school right now?
I don't know. School is boring.
But why do you think you haven't been able to go back?
Because the coronavirus going around.
What's coronavirus?
COVID-19, then if people get it, that means they will die. And kids be dying too from it.
On one hand, it seemed like any other family's home in the US, right? There was a Paw Patrol bedspread and kids' artwork on the walls and, a mom struggling to get her children to wake up. And then there are some absolutely shocking moments when you realize she lives in one of the poorest areas of the country. Like there are gunshot holes in a room upstairs from just random violence. You just got so many details. Was the film you set out to make the film you ended up making?
So, documentary filmmaking it's a tricky beast, and it's different than what, my training and what my work prior it has been as a print reporter. Like I'm very comfortable in having a question in my mind as a print reporter, going and talking to a bunch of people or digging up information or showing up in places and then synthesizing or feeling like, okay, at least I have some answers or some other people have answers or analysis I can share that sheds light on this big question that I had. So with a documentary film, I had questions. I had big questions at the beginning of this, but I had no idea of how it was going to turn out. And my quote unquote expert source is not really sure. She's just living her life. So there's a great deal more uncertainty involved when you're just letting something play out in front of you. And there's other concerns, like as an executive producer, like budgeting is a huge one because I'm applying for grants, trying to keep this whole operation going. And I didn't have enough money or time to be there as much as I wanted, to get all the moments I wanted, even though we were there a lot. But I have a full-time job. And so I was kind of doing this all on my own time with my own money that I was applying for. And I was not paying myself, and I have yet not paid myself. But everybody who worked for me got paid to do the work that they did on this film. And there are moments of crises in making a documentary film, at least there are for me, when you're like, do I have a narrative story? Is there conflict? Is there tension? Like, is there going to be any kind of resolution? And I certainly, every time I've made a documentary, I've had that moment of crisis where I'm like, where is this going? And how is this going to finish? And how am I going to tell this story? So it's been a learning process for me too, Kavitha. I mean, I'm no expert. I've only made 2 docs, but it's definitely been, and having people who are experienced and have made documentaries or have made films to turn to has been really valuable and important for me.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that stood out for me was oftentimes, like even as an audio reporter or a print reporter, when you're doing a long, in-depth project, you feel like, what if my subject backs out or no longer wants to participate? And sometimes, especially with print, you kind of follow extra people as backup. Obviously, you couldn't do it. It was really expensive. But was that a concern of yours at all?
I think it's always a bit of a concern. So one thing that helped me that I had worked out with my editors at the Post-Dispatch is that I did a series of columns along the way while I was, because I knew that the documentary was going to take time, but I turn around a column every week. I write feature stories every week, and so I kind of also used that as a trust building mechanism with my subject, because I wanted her to get a sense of, well, what does it look like to be in the public eye, to share my story in such a personal way? Can I trust this reporter? What are her intentions? And then what is the kind of feedback that I get? So the fact that I was able to do like a series of 5 stories and columns about her over this time really helped keep her engaged. And I promise you, there was some feedback that she did not like, even from within her own relatives and family, that got me a little nervous that we had to talk through. But to me, that was really important.
Give me an example of feedback kind of you had to talk through with her.
Sure. Well, I'll kind of start with why I think Tyra also saw that there were some benefits for her to do this. Okay. So when I did my very first column about her, that one that we talked about that was funded by the Pulitzer Foundation, and I described how hard she was trying and all the effort she was making and still really falling short in some ways and being able to give her kids the education she wanted. Anytime you write something or share something like it with the public, there are going to be people who want to help. And there were many people who wanted to help. And I was able to connect her to them. And one of them in particular, an older gentleman, retired, very different life story than her in every way. And his wife said, we really want to help this family. And they've stayed in touch with them over the entire 2 years and they've become like family. So I felt like initially that was really affirming to her that people were not critiquing her. But for example, she's a single mom with 3 kids and they're 2 different fathers. So as you know, the trolls and people who comment, anybody can comment, had some negative things to say and some hurtful things to say. And she did ask me about I don't like that. I don't like what people are saying about me. And my family is saying that and they don't like that. And so I had to tell her, focus on the good that you're doing and what this can do for your family and the voice that you're giving to other moms in your situation. And there was a time there's a point in the film in which she admits that she had lied to me earlier about whether or not she was being able to make ends meet, because I knew the math was not adding up.
Right.
And she told me on the phone, because we had, in addition to what you see on the film, we had, hours and hours of phone conversations and text messages. She said, no, I wasn't totally honest, but I was embarrassed. And I don't want people to feel sorry for me. And I don't want people to pity me or judge me. And we had a big conversation about, Tyra, how many moms in your situation will have a chance to be able to tell their story like this? So I said to her, do you want to, it's important for you to tell your own story, but how important for you is it to be able to tell the story of so many other people who don't get a chance to? And I think that really meant something to her.
Let's talk some logistics. How much did the film cost and how did you go about raising the money?
Sure. So the film cost about $20,000 to make. And like I said, I didn't pay myself at all. So all of that money went towards people I had to hire to shoot the film, to do sound, to do editing, post-production, all of that. And actually, of course, you never feel like you have enough money. And this is considered like a micro, small budget film. So, it's like very low end. But what I ended up doing is I applied for several grants. I got, like you said, the EWA Fellowship, which was, I think I got $5,000 for that. I applied for a racial healing and justice fund, money out of St. Louis. I applied for a regional arts grant from our regional arts commission. I applied for several grants that I didn't get, but I ended up getting 4 or 5 grants that I was able to cobble together the money. But the difficult thing is they come in at different times. They have different requirements and timelines. So it's a lot to juggle and manage. It's almost like a full-time job to be able to apply for grants, figure out the money, keep the budgets, figure out your timeline, and then also think about the story and the reporting. And I'm also doing my other job. So for, a year and a half, all my extra time was going to this project, basically. This is the thing, Kavita. I think sometimes filmmakers, independent filmmakers who don't have a lot of money or experience or a name for themselves in this genre, they don't understand, if you want to make a film, it has to be a question or a story that compels you so much that you are willing to just really give it all your extra time and attention and work for a couple of years without really expectation of what you personally might get out of it, but just because the story is so compelling and important to you.
One of my favorite scenes is where Tyra organizes a graduation for her son and daughter and a few friends' children. And they're in pre-K and first grade, I think.
Yes.
She has a little makeshift red carpet and the 5 children wear graduation gowns and there are tons of balloons. Let's listen to a little bit.
Well, today we have 2021 graduates of class kindergarten, first grade, and pre-K. Will be going to the next chapter in their life, and they will be enjoying today, and today will have a good and awesome day. So the first person up today we will have is Helena. Can we come up, please?
I'm Elena, and I'm 5, and I'm finna be in kindergarten. I want to be a doctor.
Good job, Elena. Now walk to your auntie. Walk to your auntie.
How many hours of tape did you gather and what was the editing process like?
Sure. So I don't know in terms of hours because it was a lot, but we had at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I would say 8 days of shooting that we did. And so, yeah, we had this all was distilled to like a 45-minute film. So it was a lot. It was a lot. And so first I had to find an editor who could understand my vision. And we had a lot of meetings just to talk through what I thought the story was. And then I sort of made an outline for her. And then I kind of pointed out, like, we talked about characters and what their narrative arc was through the film. And then I had her put together like a rough cut of different scenes and in the order that she thought they would go. And then I sort of gave notes and feedback on that. And then I would suggest maybe moving certain scenes or restructuring it a certain way or using different, because I'd been there for all the shooting. So I knew the footage that we had. And if I felt like something worked better, I would say maybe we could try this instead. But I had hired a proper, editor, like skilled technical editor to do the actual work, whereas I was giving the guidance and feedback and notes on it. And then when I felt like we had a pretty solid cut, I shared it with a documentarian who's more experienced, whose work I know, and I asked for feedback. And then he actually had some very good feedback about, well, what if you move this around? Or what if you try this? Or what if the story might work better if you do this? Mm-hmm. So then I went to her and I said, can we make these changes? And then after that, you kind of are in the fine cut. Like once you've got the structure locked down, then you're just, going through the finishing of the film. So the post-production usually, I mean, for me, because I'm also doing it, in a piecemeal kind of fashion, can sometimes take as long as the shooting can. In this case, I was lucky that it didn't, but it often can.
Mm-hmm. What surprised me was how soon after shooting you started editing. Like, you've shot scenes from the middle of last year and the film came out at the end of last year.
Well, I mean, part of that was also because of the requirements of some of the grants I had applied for. They had deadlines as to when this project had to air. I mean, I definitely wish I had had more time, but I had deadlines as to when I had to turn in reports or a project had to air. So that there was a great deal of urgency to that.
Was it hard for you moving between the written and visual languages?
I think the very first time I did it, because this is my third film, I've made a narrative short, I've made another documentary, and now this is my second documentary, and I'm working on my fourth documentary now. So I think initially there was like a pretty steep learning curve, because for, 20 plus years, I've just been I've just been doing written storytelling. But then once you see and hear things and really start thinking about scenes, I think it's improved me as a writer as well. Because if you think about some of the longer stories or even some of the columns I write as screenplays or as action unfolding, like you said, the show don't tell thing. What do I hear? What do I see? How do I take the viewer there? Right? I mean, that's what we all try to do in our writing anyway. Sometimes it's harder. Sometimes it's very hard to do, but the fundamentals that you learn as a storyteller, like, having a 3-act structure in a longer narrative project, having a character development, having tension, having a resolution, like all of that is the same.
Well, I have to say my favorite scene in the entire film was the end of the testing scene. I just thought it was just a microcosm of a lot of American education in a nutshell. So can you set up the scene for us when Tyra takes her 2 children for testing?
Sure. So after this year and a half of interrupted schooling, homeschooling / virtual schooling, Tyra takes her kids to a place that does educational testing to see where her kids really are. Like, are they behind? Are they on track? Because she's tried so hard to keep them on track. And the kids have 2 days each of all kinds of educational testing. And then we record the scene in which she gets the results.
And even though he's in 2nd grade, he's showing scores that are within that kindergarten level.
They've been out of school since kindergarten.
Yes.
And it's been a long time, so me and his teacher just had a conversation, and we both been working with him, and his spelling has improved a lot from them being out of school.
All I can tell you is that when we look at the national norms, he really is showing a significant deficit. Based on the results of the evaluation, our licensed clinical social worker diagnosed Miguel with a specific learning order in reading, word reading, comprehension, and it's at a severe level, also known as dyslexia.
That's what I have.
He also met eligibility criteria for a specific learning disorder with impairment in written expression, spelling accuracy, organization of written expression, moderate. If you go to the school and you give them this report, you can request a special evaluation so that he would be able to receive services within the school.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to his teacher and for us to get on the same accord with him, because he's just like any normal other kid. They put you in those classes because you're not able to. I feel that he's able to do anything any normal kid could do, and I'm going to stick with that.
I thought it was just so amazing that you captured it on film, Aisha, because both parents, both Tyra and the woman who is testing the children, both want the best for the children, but completely different kind of visions. It's almost like they're on different tangents about what to do. Like, there are such huge gaps in terms of race, income, language, culture, like the path forward. It was just amazing. I mean, the part we heard where she says, you can take this letter to school and get services. And Tyra becomes almost defensive and says, no, my child is normal. It was so poignant.
That was very hard for me. And I had a feeling that Tyra was not going to accept the results, because here's the other thing, Kavita. It's very hard for me, especially as someone who used to cover education full time. Like, I could see where her efforts were not really working, especially in teaching Miguel, her son, to read. And I knew that his ability to be able to read was going to be crucial to him, to his academic success. And I had to do a lot of arranging as a producer to be able to get them to get this testing done, because usually it's $5,000 each. So we had to apply for the scholarship so they could get it. I had to do a lot. And also because that was a central question of the film, of like, is this mother's effort who's trying so hard going to be enough during this massive disruption, right? So I needed to find a way to be able to show, is it or not, right? And what that scene, so I knew that Tyra was not going to really believe that what Miriam's school had to say. But I knew that she also needed to hear it. And I knew that there were some interventions that had to be done so that her kid's future was not completely derailed. It was a tricky situation for me to be in as a journalist, because you can't watch, I was not going to watch a child's future be completely derailed, because he's also in a school district that is very, very serves kids with very high needs. And because her kids are well behaved, they were really falling through the cracks. They were not getting the attention and services they needed. Right. And I was like, oh my gosh, if this child cannot read at all by third grade, like, I know what the statistics are about what his future will look like. Right. And so what that scene revealed to me was how Tyra's own educational trauma was playing out in this cycle in our American public school system, where issues of class and race have been historic problems and, structural problems in our education system. You see it play out in this mom who's clearly dealing with her own educational trauma, saying that, no, I'm not going to have my kids go through that. I will be able to, like, my love and my effort alone will be able to lift them up.
Yes, the distrust in the system, the educational system, was so apparent in that scene where the tester says, we need to keep an eye on your daughter's progress. And she says, she's only in kindergarten. She's only in kindergarten. And I was just thinking, like we've seen wealthy parents, right, apply for special ed services even when their children don't need it.
Right.
Or it's like kindergarten is too late for them to start tutoring and other help.
Right.
to get their children ahead. And to
Right.
see her reaction was, I just thought that was just brilliant that you had captured it on tape. The age-old educational question, should we be looking at effort or should we be looking at effectiveness? And it was so obvious they were on two different paths. Aisha, I wanted to ask you what you wish you had known when you started. Like, were there groups or resources or any tips that you would have for reporters who say, hey, I'd love to try out something like this?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about two different types of preparation. One is your mental and emotional preparation. And like I said, going into it, realizing that it's so emotionally and demanding and time intensive to take on a documentary project, especially if you want to do a longer embedded with a family for over a period of time project, as opposed to something that might just take place over a semester or in a more structured kind of way. So you have to go into it with those eyes open, and that if you're willing to put in a lot of unpaid labor and time into a project like this. So, and then the second thing I would say is that I didn't realize how painful it was going to be for me every time I left a shoot. Like there were several times I came home and cried because I was so upset, and I felt so helpless about what I was witnessing. It was breaking my heart. And I had to have people who I could talk through that with and figure out, what can I do in this situation? Okay, that should not be underestimated. And especially when you're building such an intimate bond of trust with someone and they're trusting you in a way to tell this really private, painful story. Okay. You can't underestimate what a toll that takes on you emotionally. Now, in terms of resources and skills and support that you should have, like I mentioned, this was my third film. So before I even started making films, I had to do a lot of reading, talking to people, research on what it takes to make an independent film. If you don't have the skills to shoot yourself and edit yourself, making connections with people in your own local independent filmmaking community to find out who does this type of work, what are the going rates, how will I raise the money, what kind of budget can I have, what types of grants are available that are out there that would allow me to do that. I think all of that pre-production work and thinking and development work is what is fundamental to the success of how your project turns out later. So I think starting with your own, finding out, like, are there local filmmakers who are interested in these kinds of projects, who have told these projects, starting with your own local community is really important. And then from there, they will also be able to tell you resources that might be available for funding, especially if you're doing a journalistic project. There are more opportunities as opposed to just doing a narrative script that you're writing and trying to develop project.
It sounds like this has been such an emotional journey, but such a fulfilling one in a way. So I wanted to end by giving you the last thought. What is something about this film or the process or the story that you will take away for your whole life?
So the question I asked in this film is this mom's efforts enough to keep her kids on track through this historic disruption where they've missed a year and a half of schooling? The answer to that is, in terms of literacy, all her efforts were not enough, and her child is not where he needs to live up to his full academic potential. And what I want viewers and anybody who listens to this or takes away from this film, like the big question to me is, like, what do we do now? How do we make sure that Miguel and Madison and Mason do have a chance and do recover and do catch up, and their futures are not permanently negatively affected by what our entire country endured? Because really, it was the kids who were most vulnerable to begin with, whose lives are going to be most impacted by the lasting effects of this pandemic, the educational impacts of this pandemic. So that, to me, is something I'm going to keep talking about. I'm going to keep writing about. It is what the bigger question and mission of this film is.
I think it comes also at such a critical point when there are billions of dollars being poured into schools to help children catch up. And yet, as we saw in your film, so much of the effort It's not even like when you get to tutoring or when there are barriers even before that. Where can EWA members who want to watch it watch it?
I am working with an educational distributor who should be able to make it available to schools and universities within 6 months. But in the meantime, prior to that, I'm offering private screenings, and people can just reach out to me and I can figure out a way if you want to show it to a group or want to have a discussion around it. I am doing private screenings until it is available through distribution.
We're talking with Aisha Sultan, who is director and executive producer of the documentary Education Interrupted. She's also a syndicated columnist for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. You can follow her on Twitter at Aisha S and on Instagram at Aisha Sultan Stories. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, Aisha.
Thank you so much.
That wraps up this episode of EWA Radio. I'm Kavita Cardoza. Do you have any questions for Aisha? Let's continue this conversation on Twitter at EdWriters. Special thanks to Angelina Liu and Kristan Obang from EWA and Raul Garcia for production assistance. The mission of the Education Writers Association is to strengthen the community of education journalists and improve the quality of education coverage. For more than 75 years, EWA has helped reporters get the story right. Thanks for listening and lifting up education journalism. Join the most innovative and passionate education community at South by Southwest EDU 2023. Take part in impactful community-driven programming, unparalleled networking opportunities, and unexpected discoveries March 6th through 9th, 2023 in Austin, Texas. Visit southbysouthwest.edu to discover more than 200 sessions already revealed, featuring inspiring thought leaders in education. Register today.